welcome to Fit to Speak. I'm Eugene. So glad to have you with us. While Tom Brady's ship was smooth sailing with his seventh Super Bowl victory earlier this month, and the former president still has won a prize no president ever wants to win despite being acquitted, the Fox News ship seems to be lost at sea as their ratings since last year's election are the equivalent of Alicia Keys' first hit single. So can Fox go back to singing high notes, or is this all part of cable news musical chairs? Brittany Johnson, the executive producer of Common Sense Entertainment, joins the show today to answer that. And I'll share a little bit of sage advice from Shepard Smith that we all should heed. That and more coming up in a few. We'll get to our interview with Brittany in just a second, but first, Fox Business might be feeling a little more like Mitch Trubisky than Tom Brady. On February 5th, Lou Dobbs' show was canceled by Fox. Now, networks do make changes to their lineups. There's nothing wrong or unusual about that. It's just that this cancellation was particularly noteworthy for the fact that not only was this Fox's highest rated program, the program's cancellation came just one day after Smartmatic, an electronic voting tech company, sued Fox News Media along with Janine Pirro, Maria Bartiromo, Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and the aforementioned Dobbs to the tune of $2.7 billion. Just to put that number in perspective, it is 1/1000th, yes, 1/1000th of the $1.9 trillion stimulus plan that US President Joe Biden has put up to help recover from the novel coronavirus pandemic. Now, Lou Dobbs, he didn't always garner the attention that he once did. This American Enterprise Institute article from 2006 said it best, stating, quote, "For the first 2 decades of his career, he was a respected business journalist known for dispassionate reporting and deferential, almost sycophantic treatment of American CEOs. Yes, he hosted a financial show on CNN at its inception in 1980 called Moneyline, but a show that talked about the ups and downs of the stock market, a matter that GameStop was all too familiar with, evolved to Lou Dobbs Tonight, where commentary about illegal immigration and birtherism ruled the day. Also around that evolution, Lou Dobbs landed a radio show. That, according to journalist Rowan Martin, who at the time worked for CNN, was the turning point of Lou's transformation. Rowan's Twitter thread on this is absolutely incredible. It is 100% worth reading and completely and utterly mind-blowing. And in other news that caught my attention, the University of Maryland is now the first university in the DMV region to announce their intent to return to an entirely in-person learning environment for this fall, provided that there are favorable conditions to do so. Citing the fact that there are now multiple vaccines, this portion of a letter written by University President Darryl Pines reads, quote, "Though we cannot forecast with certainty, we expect that the majority of our campus community will be eligible to get a COVID-19 vaccine before the beginning of the fall semester. Classes designed for in-person delivery are expected to be delivered face-to-face on campus this fall semester, and staff will be expected to resume their on-campus roles. We recognize, however, that some courses may make use of multiple modes of delivery, example, blended, primarily in-person with online content, and that under special circumstances, some staff may be able to accomplish their jobs partially through telework. As we have in the past, we will maintain our focus on the health and safety of our campus community and adapt as necessary based on public health guidance." President Pines' wish may be President Biden's command as he announced at the National Institutes of Health earlier this month that there will be enough vaccines for 300 million Americans by the end of July, 100 million of which are coming at the end of May as opposed to June, and the balance of which by the end of July. We'll be talking more about the vaccine rollout and the impacts of the novel coronavirus pandemic over a year later in the March edition of this program with Sophia Ransom. She is a pharmacist with expertise in drug development. Here's a little sneak peek of that interview.
With the previous administration, there was a news story that came, I think it was in January, that there were, batches of vaccine that were just unaccounted for. They didn't know where it ended up in the system, if it went to the right place or is sitting in a warehouse somewhere. When Biden came in, they said that they really had nothing to work with. So I'm hoping right now they are trying to, build up the logistical part of it that will make it, a more smooth process for everybody.
I'll tell you, folks, this was an incredible conversation and one that everybody needs to hear. So in March, I want you to make sure to subscribe and ring the bell on our YouTube channel so that you are the first to see the episode when it drops in March. I hope that you'll be able to tune in for that. And the rollout of the vaccine seemingly cannot come soon enough, as I was not terribly surprised to read that yet another dorm on the University of Maryland campus earlier this month had to go into enhanced health precautions. This time, the residents of La Plata Hall had to restrict their activities for 10 days or just go home, wherever that is. They also could not attend in-person classes, among other restrictions, and they, of course, had to be tested for the virus, this amid a 2-day spike in cases on campus. Those of you who watched this program on October 29th of last year probably recall that we spoke with Diamondback reporter Clara Longo de Freitas about her reporting on the situation that occurred in Denton Hall, where there were also enhanced health precautions imposed on their residents. And that story was also referenced by Solomon Kamisiong of the Nimburu Cultural Center and the UMD Black Faculty and Staff Association in our New Year's Eve edition. Both episodes are worth revisiting on vimeo.com/CSE Media. Also, just as we were about to finalize this program, it was announced that starting February 20th until just at least 1 day shy of the end of the month, that students in all residence halls must sequester in place. They can only go to the student union to test for the virus or to get food, though they can also go to the dining halls to get food if they wish, or if they dare. All classes were held virtually, labs were continued with social distancing, of course, and Waikamoku Hall, a residence hall on campus, was open to add capacity for any student who tests positive for the virus, and more space may open if the need arises. Keep in mind that the impetus for this was the fact that 95 cases were reported on campus between Valentine's Day and February 20th, and the positivity rate was 1.7%. And if that weren't bad enough, the day after the restrictions were put in place, 49 cases were reported on campus, the highest of the spring semester and of the academic year. I will provide more commentary in a special edition of Fit to Speak on Thursday, March 4th. You do not want to miss it. I applaud President Pines for acknowledging the uncertainty, at least in terms of the distribution of vaccines among the students of the University of Maryland, along with, I'm sure, other presidents of universities across the country and around the world are kind of sort of facing that same situation. One thing is certain, though, the coronavirus and the mutations that are going around right now, they are not taking a break anytime soon. And joining me now is Brittany Johnson, the executive producer of Common Sense Entertainment. Brittany, welcome. It is nice to have you on the program. And let's go ahead and get started. So, Brittany, I've been talking in some of the past shows about the dramatic shifts that may very well be going on with some of the cable news outlets, and certainly Fox News being one of them. The ratings for Fox, for the first time in 20 years, they've gone to third place, and this is on the back of the election and the events of January 6th. Now, in looking at some of the stuff here, they have laid off some of their staff, 16 people, including political editor Chris Steyerwalt, who, as we know, was criticized by Fox's own people for calling the election in Arizona for President Biden. Now, I'm of a few theories that are surrounding this decline as to why Fox is in third place. The first moment that I think was Fox News calling Pennsylvania for Joe Biden.
The Fox News decision desk can now project that former Vice President Joe Biden will win Pennsylvania and Nevada, putting him over the 270 electoral votes he needs to become the 46th president of the United States.
A lot of people will say that Fox does run interference for the GOP, and that most cable news viewers, they watch news to conform to their already held beliefs, not so much to inform. And the second theory that I have in terms of what is happening with Fox and why they're in the third place is that Fox has got a homogenous viewer base. The audience of Fox News, nearly 95% white, and the age of their viewer is 66, the average age, that is, and it's not reflective of where the country is at this point. So am I crazy about these theories, Brittany? What do you think is happening here?
Well, Eugene, thank you so much first for having me come on to this show. And second, I don't think you're crazy. I think we're really seeing a big shift in what has been traditionally referred to as the right in the cable news network wars channel kind of collapsing under its own weight, especially after the events of November 3rd and January 6th. And I think this is a shift that Fox News is trying to pull a little bit more towards a conservative core and keeping those outside of, what mainstream media would call traditional conservative views. They're trying to keep an audience that is under a specific spell of media that is contained to them, media that is, like you were saying earlier, something that specifically is held value for their conservative views, their viewpoints about the election, and their viewpoints really about the Biden administration, which was sworn in, as we know, last Wednesday. I think with Murdoch and crew, the biggest thing that they're trying to do is making sure that everybody under the Fox News roof is on the same agenda. Before, there might have been people who were a little bit more moderate, a little bit, I hesitate to use the word liberal, but just not as conservative as some of the more hardcore hosts and anchors. But after this culling, after this 20 staffers leaving both Fox and foxnews.com, this is something that's kind of shaken up the order and trying to make sure that their house is in order to keep on to the viewers that they've had. As you said earlier, they are losing viewers. They are losing people whose viewpoints they wanted to hold on to for ratings and, of course, for advertisement.
Fox, as we know, has that conservative bent. And, they definitely were very much in a lot of the shows, especially all the opinion shows, as you mentioned, Hannity, Ingram, and the like, Tucker Carlson certainly as well, very pro-Trump. Very, very, very pro-Trump. But then it's like at that turning point of Pennsylvania and Arizona being called, it's like there were some people, when that happened, they were like, oh, well, looks like Fox is not as loyal to Trump anymore in terms of some of, the viewers. So they're running over to places like Newsmax and One American News. That could be argued that is even further to the right than Fox. So you have some people that are like, okay, Fox is not pro-Trump enough. Some people saying, oh, they're not crazy enough. So are they in between kind of sort of that rock and hard place here?
They are, and it's a really interesting phenomenon. As we all know, Fox News started in the early 90s as a spinoff to what CNN was doing, and eventually when MSNBC was developed. And it's always had this curtain of, or this platform of, we're going to be the conservative news network. We're going to give you the information that we think, especially with its counterpart CNN and MSNBC, which we think is more conservative, more traditional American values, more in its infancy, the idea of this is the news that the older Americans, the white Americans, the Americans who have these traditional views and values will come to trust and value. But you're seeing, and it's something I kind of want to point out, you're seeing it as there is a Trump party, there is the Republican Party, and then there's their conservative and even radical right parties that are emerging out of this incident that happened, not really since January 6th. It's been ongoing before that, but kind of came to a head at January 6th. So Fox News is in a precarious situation because they have to divide loyalties. Like you mentioned before, with Sinclair, Newsmax, and OAN, you're getting these kind of hardcore conservative news networks that are coming up, chomping at the bit to dethrone Fox Business and Fox News, because they feel as if their content will kind of cater towards more hardcore conservatives. And then you also have people who are kind of not as socially conservative, but very business conservative, very militarily conservative, that kind of are picking up on the values that both CNN and MSNBC are developing for them to kind of curtail to that audience as well. And then on the extreme right, you do have networks. I don't necessarily want to name those specific publications or syndications that speak to a more radical left, more, in some cases, fascist or even racially motivated conservative ideology, that the kind of fringe that aren't going towards conservatism or Trumpism are kind of finding their audience for. So really what's happening is at Fox News is a splintering. You can't please everybody in the party. You can't please these desperate parties that have sprung up after the collapse of the conservative Republican Party. So what Fox is trying to do is hold on to a center core, a center conservative core that represents, maybe social conservatism, maybe financial conservatism, maybe even military / American independent conservatism, anti-globalism conservatism, but not necessarily going so far as to agree with the right, hardcore, white nationalist audience that was there in the background, but had been placated by the fact that there was only one place to get the kind of news they wanted to hear. And now it's all over the place. So as far as Fox is concerned, they have to make tough decisions in the next calendar year, in the next TV rating year, of how they want to present the stories that they want to present. And I think that's really going to put them in a really bad situation once they realize that they just can't hold on to the audience they used to.
It's interesting, and really, it kind of leads me to this. It's like, where does Fox, where does the cable news in general go from here at this point in this current Biden administration? Because now, at this point, who knows whether or not this is a bit of a sugar high that is going to come crashing down, and then eventually all of the conservatives are going to return to Fox, and they will be number one again, and kind of as opposition to President Biden. Where do you see this going from here?
In the immediate term, so in Biden's first 100 days, I think that Fox is still going to need to rebrand and rebuild and kind of cater to that audience that have either splintered to a more moderate left or to a more radical right. In the future, Republicans and conservative Americans aren't necessarily going to want to jump ship to go to MSNBC or CNN to get their news. They still are going to rely on some of these up and coming publications. And for some members who may be more internet savvy, rely on message boards, rely on alternative social media sites like Gab, Parler, like Me Too, and these other sites that have come up where, again, you can kind of get that informational echo chamber that if you are in that kind of situation you are interested in having, without necessarily having to pay lip service to the idea that there might be another output to get that information from, such as Fox Business or such as Fox Entertainment or Fox News. So I think the biggest thing that's going to happen in this calendar year, so 2021, is that we see the splintering happen completely. What I predict is that Fox News will see either a quarter to a third of their original audiences disappear, and I don't think they're going to be able to get them back. However, as folks age, as we have an aging population who has certain cares, especially with the pandemic going on, and with the understanding that the racially unjust mechanisms that were in place last year aren't going to go away, there still might be time to call a new wave of conservatively minded folks who are concerned about their life, their family's life, their neighborhood and community's life, and their ethnic ideology, and making sure that that's something that is central to what they're interested in as far as getting news about in their daily lives. So while Fox may lose some of these people who were hardcore supporters, it doesn't mean that they're not going to gain support. It also doesn't mean that under a Democratic House of Representatives, under a Democratic Senate, and under a Democratic White House, there won't be this tension that arises when policies and edicts go out and they're not going to agree with that. They're going to still need to turn to someone who will speak the language that they're understanding and wanting to understand so they can get that information. So my prediction, maybe, halfway through the Biden administration, Fox News becomes the powerhouse that it was before. But as of right now, they kind of have to lick their wounds and then find ways to kind of rebuild an audience that they might not have had before.
In a way, they've certainly become, at least thus far, and as of the time of this recording, I mean, the jury will still be out on a lot of this, as you said, as we go through the Biden administration in the months ahead, and kind of sort of this relatively quieter news cycle. It's like, oh, we'll see. We're going to see what happens to these guys, because in a lot of ways that have been the case, it's kind of looking like they are becoming a victim of their own success. So we'll see. So Brittany Johnson, we'll keep watching this, the executive producer of Common Sense Entertainment. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Eugene. Take care.
One more thing before we go. This graphic from the Visual Capitalist website broke down 180 articles from multiple outlets with regard to describing the events and the participants of the domestic terrorism on the U.S. Capitol building in Washington on January 6th. Starting with the event, riots was the most commonly used term and was used in just about the same amount of instances in most of the outlets, except for the Epoch Times. Breach was their more preferred term in 13 instances. Let's look at the two cable news outlets. They were about the same in most aspects, although CNN also used the term breach to describe the event in 6 instances to Fox's 3. Now, in describing the participants, all except 2 outlets, that is Breitbart and the Epoch Times, used the word mob. The latter publication in 13 instances, more than any other, called the participants protesters. And Breitbart and Fox News, the latter of which has been mired in third place in the ratings, as we talked about earlier in the program with Brittany Johnson, Trump supporters was used to describe the people who invaded the Capitol. Rather interesting. It's a pity that none of them in this context used domestic terrorism, which is exactly what all this was. Still, it's nice to have this level of granular detail. Now, I would have liked to have seen MSNBC and a few of the other networks and other news outlets on this list so that we can really drill down on this. But I have to tell you, the information that we did get was actually really wonderful. It really was. Producers and the consumers of the media, that's all of us, we really have to evaluate these information and any source that we're getting in good faith. We try to do that here on this program. And Shepard Smith, who, as many people know, he used to be on Fox News and now is anchoring a newscast on CNBC, had some very good advice, I think, in this interview with Christiane Amanpour.
Personally, if I read a byline or I watch a program where the author or the speaker has repeatedly misinformed me, led me astray, or lied to my face, I shut that source off.
Yes. Music to my ears. Well done, Shep. Bravo. That's the advice right there that we all should heed. And wouldn't the world be a much better place? And thank you so much for watching. And listen, there's going to be a lot more where that came from, so you better stay tuned to catch it all. In the meantime, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media accounts for more information, including all of the bonus content that you'll see from today's show. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you do not miss all of our videos. You can be the first one to get all of our videos if you subscribe. So hit that button right there for us. And until next time, I'm Eugene, and remember, we will not be silenced.